Okay, well, before we end this program on this Friday, let's take a look back on election night itself and take a look at the final results, because joining us right now are two men our audience knows very well, whether you watch them right here on CPAC or, heaven forbid, elsewhere, or if you listen to the Numbers podcast. The two very integral to any election coverage these days. Polls analyst Éric Grenier is the founder and the writer behind The Writ, and polls analyst Philippe Fournier is the founder and the writer behind 338 Canada. Hello to both of you.
Hello.
Good evening, Michael.
Okay, so both of you are about the numbers. So I'm going to begin with the numbers. Let's take a look right now at your predictions around popular vote first. You see them right there, and bravo to both of you. Not far off from how things played out when you look at the bottom line on Monday night. But let's now take a look at the seat breakdown, your projections, because the final result not working out as you two had predicted. Philippe, I'll get you to start us out here. What happened?
Well, it's interesting when we have an overestimation or an underestimation in an election. We always look, was it the polls or was it the seat projections? Was it the modeling? And in this case, it was a bit of the polls, but also when we take the regional breakdown, I think Éric and I had similar numbers in British Columbia, in Quebec, in Atlantic Canada. And not only these numbers were close, but they were bang on. The only numbers that differ from the actual seat results was in Ontario, and this is exactly where the polls missed 2 or 3 points for the Conservatives. A small error, should we say, but still an underestimation. And so this is what happened. If there was a 2-3 point error in Atlantic Canada, we would not talk about it. But in Ontario, a 2-3 point error leads to 15-20 seats.
Yeah, you're nodding your head yes there, Éric. Join in on that.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it, because when you look at those numbers, it was really just all between Liberal and Conservative, right? The Bloc and the NDP numbers went pretty much as expected. And the reason that the Conservatives won an extra 15-20 seats than expected is largely because of what happened in Ontario. Because as Philippe says, because the polls on average underestimated the Conservatives by a few points, that they ended up doing a bit better than expected and winning a lot of the close races. So, on that board that you had there, you had our specific projections, which, we have to give like a precise number, right? Because people always ask for that. But our ranges suggested that if the Liberals were going to lose a lot of the toss-ups, which they ended up doing, they would fall into minority territory. If they won even more of the toss-ups, then the majority would have been even bigger, which I think might have been what some were expecting as well. So it just kind of shows how when you have a lot of close races and when the polls do a really good job, but off by a couple points in the key battleground, that can be a pretty consequential difference. And we kind of see that, in the United States, for example, when the polls, the perception that the polls missed the last election by a big margin, they didn't. It just matters that small amount of error flipped a lot of states from Kamala Harris to Donald Trump. The same kind of thing with obviously different implications kind of happened in parts of Ontario, the GTA, and the Southwest.
Okay, here's what I don't understand, though, and I'll ask both of you to comment on this, because, I understand there's a greater challenge when you're trying to capture how people are feeling in a more rural area or perhaps even smaller urban settings. But, this is Ontario, and more than that, the most populous part of Ontario. How was the Conservative support not captured? I understand you're saying there's a margin, there's a difference here, but why was that not captured when you talk about Canadian polls, Philippe? It seems that Ontario tends to be sampled very well, and as is the GTA.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, Michael, and I would respectfully push back on this, because the Conservatives ended up with 44% of the vote, give or take a few decimal points. And this matches the high range of the Conservative, but it's still within the range of the Conservative vote in Ontario. And so the reason I say I push back is because a lot of observers and many voters and many readers of our columns, Éric and I, they expect perfection out of polls. So basically, the popular vote in Ontario, I had the Conservatives at 41 plus or minus 3, and they had 44. So it was well within the range. And as Éric said, 168 seats for the Liberals, it's well within the bell curve. And I'm not making excuses here, but this is what stats work. we would be more comfortable like giving publicly a range of outcome instead of a lone number. And both Éric and I do give a number and a range of outcome. But I don't feel this is a major mistake or error here. It was well within the range of possible outcomes, at least for me and Éric.
Yeah, you know, absolutely.
If I can, if you don't mind, if I can just get in that too. I think that what we also find out from these kinds of things is that our models are generally based on the idea that if all else being equal, this is what the results should be, right? And so when you do see that there are some regions that move a little bit more than expected, it tells you a lot actually about what was happening in those regions. For example, Ottawa voted far more Liberal than you would have expected based on what the polls suggested province-wide. We know that that was probably quite tied to promises from the Conservative Party to reduce the size of the public sector and the public service in Ottawa. You saw that the numbers in the GTA, particularly in Brampton and in York region, the Conservatives did really, really well. We have some indication that it does seem like the Conservatives got a lot of more support from new Canadians. This is the kind of thing that is harder to pick up in a province-wide poll, and I think it does kind of show that when you do have some results that don't go quite as expected, it's often just telling you about what was motivating voters differently in one area versus another.
Yeah, and you know, I'm going to say to both of you, we've put up a range board as well, because you guys were, to your point, Philippe, you were, in terms of the range, you were there, right? And so I think this is, you know, what people are watching right now. But I wonder, and just very quickly from both of you, what was your biggest surprise of the night? Philippe?
Well, I would say Southwest Ontario, because there are surprises, but big surprises, I would say Windsor West, London, Fanshawe, Kitchener Centre, the Niagaras going to the Conservatives. We knew it was kind of close, but they really did well in Southwestern Ontario. And I'm looking forward to see post-election polling as to why that is. I know pollsters have told me maybe it was the tariffs were one thing, but the counter tariffs also hurt the Liberals in that region, of course, with blue-collar workers. So I would say that would be my only big surprise, because as I said, and Éric is, I think it's the same too, in Quebec and in BC, two provinces that are not easy to model in normal elections, the projections were right on.
Yeah, and to that, you guys are saying BC was the hardest to predict, but you guys both did really well in British Columbia. I want to acknowledge that. Éric, what was your biggest surprise?
Well, I think that just speaks to that when there's a lot of change, we kind of always have doubts that it's actually going to be able to predict what's going to happen on the ground. But my surprise actually was the NDP. We saw that they underperformed their polls by about 2 points. You had 8% in our averages, but the polls overestimated the NDP by about 2 points. I wouldn't have thought that was going to happen when they were already so close to their floor. And when you saw some of the results, we had heard over the last few weeks that NDP incumbents were going to outperform, the ground game was going to make the difference. It really didn't. And I was actually kind of surprised that we weren't more surprised that the NDP didn't shock us with an overperformance, that they actually did a lot worse than I think some expected. So it kind of shows that, you know, there's the conventional wisdom what's going to happen, and then there's actually what happens.
Okay. Quickly before we go, Philippe, this is to you. Are you about to undergo a name change? 343 Canada, perhaps?
No, 338 is now vintage. It's like Coke Classic. I'm keeping this one. You know, in 20 years, when the House has 362 seats, people will ask, what is 338? Well, let me tell you a story of the 2010s. So no, I'm keeping that. So.
Okay, good to know. Hey, listen, you know, I'm asking about the numbers. Thank you for addressing them, but I will say this to both of you. You guys do such amazing work, and because of your work, Canadians understand the process that much more. So bravo to both of you. Thank you for what you do. Éric, our election coverage would not have been what it was without you, so thank you to you. And yeah, you don't get to retire, just saying.
No, don't worry, I won't. Thanks so much. It was a really fun campaign to be part of.
Yeah, absolutely. Fun to have you both throughout the whole process. Éric, Philippe, thank you for this.
Thank you, Michael.